We're making the invisible visible. How do we take abstract theories and things like time and things like interoception and make them so children can understand? We make the invisible visible.
Wow, I love that as our top tip. How do we make the invisible visible, which is with emotions, why some of my children...
And it's not just that, it's your ADD child, the gamut of all the children you might have with special needs, your SEND kids in classes require that thing.
Yeah.
And with interoception, I think the second tip would be to, live out loud. Talk about your emotions. Sometimes we're talking about, going to the toilet. I remember, my husband saying he's going out, and we're saying it's too much information, just go and do it.
Yeah.
But actually, with interoception and the child that hasn't got it, there's never too much information.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sue Larkey podcast. As I always say, you have to embrace difference to make a difference. Let's dive into today's podcast. Well, welcome, everybody. I am so excited. We have Kay joining us again on the podcast today. Last time Kay joined me to talk about the Red Beast and all of her wonderful books was back at episode 76. Those of you that don't know Kay, she is a specialist advisory teacher and an international author, written some of my favourite picture books. She's currently a part-time lecturer at the University of Brighton, delivering the postgraduate certificate in autism. She's worked in both mainstream and special school and trained professionals, parents and caregivers in all aspects of ASD. As an author and the mother of a son with ASD, she has spent over 30 years researching autism. So welcome, Kay.
Thank you. Since you last thought, it's actually now over 35 years.
Yeah.
Autism and all its ins and outs. Yeah, how the time passes so quickly.
So true, Kay. And I think we have such similar backgrounds. So Kay and I, last time on the podcast, actually felt like we'd known each other for years. So we'll try and keep on track about the fabulous new book. But I just thought, for anyone who doesn't know you and your books, can you explain why you use therapeutic storybooks? Like, why do you do it this way?
It was a medium that I used when I was a special needs teacher in a school for children with severe autism and Asperger's syndrome, and they were not able to access mainstream education at all. And I found that the biggest problems that we had, the difficulties always arose from their big emotions and them not understanding how to control. And I think I told you with the Red Beast that I had a little boy who would lash out at everyone if we were in assemblies or if we were going in the line to, through the school. And we'd have to wrap him. I would wrap him in a blanket and lower him to the ground. And while he was there, I thought, I was going to tell him a story about something to do with anger. And I went home and thought about it, got my son to do some really quick pictures and took this in. And the next time that, he had a meltdown, this was emotional flooding, we were ready with a blanket, wrapped him up, laying down. And then I looked up and I saw all my class were watching as well and were really calm. So I started to tell the story. They were all listening. And just since then, that's how I got that idea. And for him, we then took him into a separate room to work on his, sort of anger skills. And one day he looked up, one of the TAs came in to take over from me, and she knocked over his pot of pencils, and he was just about to lose it. And he turned to me and said, "She's woken my Red Beast." So I knew then that he got the idea. So this idea of a metaphor, which might seem, difficult to understand, we know definitely children with Asperger's syndrome can get metaphors. And if we make it more simple for children with more classic autism, they too can get the idea of a story. And a story means we can repeat it and read it again and again. And, children, when they enjoy a book, that's what they want you to do. And children with autism particularly enjoy the repetition of doing something like social stories. So it's almost like a social story, social story format, if you like, within a character-driven book.
Yeah. And also what adds to, I think, Haytham's drawings also add that element. So can you tell us a little bit about Haytham's illustrations? Because he's amazing.
Well, I've always said this. If it wasn't for Haytham's illustrations, I wouldn't be a published author. It was very fortunate for me that I was able to put together this book, and I sent it to the National Autistic Society, the Red Beast, sort of free, and said to them, please, I found this is useful. They kept on hold of it for about a year, and I didn't hear anything. And then they got back to me, they said, look, we can't do picture books, it's too expensive, but we do like it, and we've sent it on to Jessica Kingsley Publishers. They kept it another year, and it turned out to be the very first picture book produced for children with autism by Jessica Kingsley, and it became a bestseller for them. But they really took a risk in doing this, because it was an expensive thing to produce a colour picture book. It's not cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. And has Haitham always loved drawing? Has that always been?
He's always used drawing as his medium, because he's got sort of classic autism, high functioning autism, and he would say to me, if I'm trying to explain, say, draw it, and of course I can't draw. So I said, well, you draw it, you show me, and that's what he would do. But of course, no piece of paper was safe. So he would just literally get anything, papers in the office, and draw. Maybe I had figures all over them because he ran out of paper, Miles, and would go, oh my God, that's my report, He got his drawings over it. But
so for anyone out there who's got children drawing all over everything, they could end up Haitham being like an international best-selling author,
Yeah. And of course, it meant then he had a lifelong interest in Disney and cartoon. And he's a bit of a cartoon animator as well. And he'd won the Vincent Lives Award at his college here, and got triple distinction for a cartoon animation he did to a song by a chap called George Formby. But he loves all that sort of thing, and the old-fashioned black and white, cartoons that particularly were interesting to him. And YouTube, of course, just now means he can just indulge himself as much as he likes on those cartoons. Before we have to get the old video in and you keep rewinding it. But yeah,
it's so good. And it's gone on to be his career, which I love.
It has, and it's something that he can do and he enjoys doing. And because he can get this like a special interest, he works tirelessly. He's the person that, can be up all night, and he's been like that now with, the book we're working on at the moment, just getting things finished. He doesn't seem to get tired, he doesn't really bother with its meal times. He can just get absorbed in doing something because he enjoys it. And
that's wonderful.
And to get, find a job you like and you'll never work again.
Yeah. That is so good. I love it. Okay, we need to talk about the new.
Yes.
Can you introduce us to Yuki? Tell us why you wrote about Yuki.
Well, Yuki, of course, it fits everything perfectly for Haitham, because they are his favourite animals. And when he was 3 or 4, he would insist that I put a tie, one of his father's ties, on the back of him so he could have a tail and be a monkey. And I was called into school because in the class they got a low mirror, and he'd been going backwards and forwards on all fours to and fro from this mirror, and they thought this was a real problem. And they called me and I said, well, he's being Mowgli from Jungle Book. I can see what he's doing right away. That's what he is. He's pretending he's And they still recall that. I said, look, the best thing to do is just turn the mirror around to the wall, and then we'd solve that problem. So
you make me laugh, Kay. I know we're so similar like that. You know me, change the structure, not the charm. How about we turn the mirror around?
Turn it around. That was it. He couldn't just stop himself because it was on the floor level, and he was able to, go on like Mowgli.
Yeah, I love it. And so with Yuki, though, looking at interoception, which you and I both been fascinated in for a long time, but some of my listeners wouldn't even know really what that is. So explain what it is.
It's the secret sense, isn't it, in a way, because we all know the 5. If you're in education, you'll know the 7, the proprioceptive and vestibular. But the interoception is the one thing, it's not new. I think some scientists years ago in the 1900s actually mentioned it, but it's only the last decade that it's taken off in terms of its link to sensory processing and other disorders as well as autism, not just autism. You've got ADHD or, these things can also be affected. And being a lecturer, I also have to keep up to date with research that's going on in academic papers. And I started getting really excited when I saw this idea of interoception, which is this internal bodily system, a system whereby we understand exactly what's happening inside the visceral sort of system of our body. And it's not just hunger, and thirst, and whether I'm hot or cold, or whether I'm not feeling well. So we've got those physical things, but it links to emotions. How do I understand what I'm feeling? If my heart's beating really fast and I'm breathing heavily, am I afraid or am I in love? The symptoms are the same. It's only your brain which will tell you what it is and advise you on what to do in terms of how you're feeling. So if you wake up and you don't feel well, to stay in bed. Have a duvet day. But if you've got sensory processing and you don't know why you're feeling the way you feel, you just know it's bad, you can't express it. And so, people are dragging you out of bed thinking you're just being deliberately difficult. And that's the thing when you get into school. You get into school and you can't tell the teacher, you don't understand if you're hungry or thirsty, you need the toilet, or you're not feeling well inside. And again, you get a reputation for being selfish and difficult. And it's so unfair. And it's because they're not able to understand what's going on. So what do you do if you feel constantly not well? You distract yourself. And our kids with autism are brilliant at finding ways to calm themselves within their special interest, because now I don't have to think about how I'm feeling. I'm absorbed. And if you've ever not been well and then you're watching a good film, you've forgotten all about, you've broken your leg or something. You totally forget about that because you're absorbed in the moment. And this is what our children do. And what can't you be when you're not well, when you're out of sorts, is sociable. And when we lecture on autism, we say it's the social, the social, the social. It's all about the social. The fact that they are not able to be, to understand this social sort of dance that we have. And they're not interested often. The more classic they are, the less interested they are in being sociable. And in yourself, if you went down, if you're not feeling well, you've got a headache, you go in the supermarket and you spot, Mrs. Jones, from around the corner who likes a good gossip, you're going to be hiding around the beans because you won't want to talk to her. You can't be sociable if you're feeling out of sorts. And that's really interoception tells us how we're feeling, why we're feeling it, and more importantly, what to do about it.
Absolutely, Kate. And when I collaborated with Temple Grandin, she said how she believes it's sensory that impacts the most on her social, without a doubt. So if that unless you address the sensory, you can't address the social. And I really think it's so important we remember that. But even for what you're talking about, that some of my children, when they're, we talk about being hungry, angry, or hangry. Yeah. Many of my children, I had an incident last term where one of my little boys was taking his lunch out to eat at recess, and the teachers are like, well, that's his lunch. But I'm like, if he's that hungry, let him have it. Like a bit like you with the mirror. Like, why not ask his mum to send a sandwich for morning tea and lunch, what we call in Australia recess, and because he mightn't have had breakfast, so he mightn't have eaten since 6 o'clock last night, and he needs to eat. Or my children who don't know they're thirsty and then they drink their whole water bottle. So knowing that regulation is so important, so important. So how does Yuki help them understand that?
Well, the snow monkeys, of course, you have to go on to YouTube and watch the 10-minute video on snow monkeys, which is called Zen Snow Monkeys. They just fitted the character of someone that would have interoceptive problems, because not only physically, why do we like snow monkeys? Well, physically, they are so lovely to look at. They've got that thick fur, and they've got these pink faces that are very human-like. They've got very dexterous fingers, so we see them on here playing with rocks. And there's one study. I got this idea for Yuki in the book, that there's a snow monkey there who flicks his fingers in the hot pools. They like to sit in these hot tubs and make bubbles, and he would just become absorbed with that and get really angry if anybody else came over to have a little look at his bubbles. He's the only one, the bubble maker on this. So they suit because of that. Not only the physically they were great and Haitham loves them, but also they are super social, especially the women. The women, they live in troops, they stay together, they have only one baby monkey, and that monkey doesn't get weaned till about 20 months, and they cling to the mother all of the time, and they get together in these social groups in troops, which they keep, they live quite long, to about 30, 35 years. Males can go off into the trees and things, alpha males, but the women stay together, and that's really shown in this book as well, that you've got this idea of this community looking after. And then we have Yuki, and Yuki's not fitting the mold. Yuki is off making snowballs and putting them in a row. With his lovely hands when it's really cold, when it should be breakfast. And Rio, his friend, will come over and want to play, but he doesn't want to play, and they end up fighting because he gets angry if somebody wants to be near to his things. In the hot tubs, you've seen the snow monkeys in the hot tubs, they're so zen-like. They've got this quality of being reflective and meditative, which is what you need to be interoceptive. To be interoceptive, you have to stop and think about how you're feeling. What is my heartbeat doing? How am I feeling? Look in the mirror, have a look. So they just fit the mold absolutely so well. And I have to say, my first draft was a really long, gets cut down ruthlessly by the publishers. But if you read the first story, I loved it because not only did I have Yuki having all these problems, but also I had another character of a little girl monkey who was very attracted to him. And he was just beginning to learn about interoception. And he said to, his grandfather who's helping him, I'm not feeling well. When so-and-so comes near me, I'm ill. I'm quite ill, but actually he was falling in love. He hadn't realised that the same heartbeat things with the back, but got cut out. We didn't get that.
But Haitham would have loved that, because that's sort of like the Lion King, isn't it? The Lion King also has that sort of romance when the big lion doesn't know. I love that. That. That is so beautiful. So if teachers read the book to their class or parent, what are we hoping that the children can learn from Yuki?
Well as having just the book itself, the story, there is a downloadable, beautifully illustrated by Haitham as well, edition, which is all the activities you can do to make the children, help them to become more aware of interoception. And it's something you could do with the whole class. I do like my books to be class-wide, so it's not something you maybe just do with one child, but you could do it with the whole class and it will help. So you're being inclusive, aren't you, in a very good, almost universal way. I like that universal teaching where every method is suited to every child. So we're not just getting, things in there that are good for the child with autism, but actually, everybody can have these, and it becomes a normal part of the classroom, so that these children don't stand out because they've got their own individual timetables or their own little, we've all got a workstation, we've all got a timetable on the wall, we're all doing the sort of things that help, because we're making, and you always ask me for a top tip, we're making the invisible visible. How do we take abstract theories and things like time and things like interoception and make them so children can understand? We make the invisible visible.
Wow, I love that as our top tip. How do we make the invisible visible, which is with emotions? Why some of my children...
And it's not just that, it's your ADD child, the gamut of all the children you might have with special needs, your SEND kids in classes require that thing.
Yeah.
And with interoception, I think the second tip would be to, live out loud. Talk about your emotions. Sometimes we're talking about, going to the toilet. I remember, my husband saying he's going out, and we're saying it's too much information, just go and do. Yeah. But actually, with interoception and the child that hasn't got it, there's never too much information. So get into the habit of talking about how you're feeling. If you've got a headache, oh my goodness, I think somebody's drilling into my head, or is hammering on me, or it's like a xylophone, giving these ideas and images, so you're making visual what it is that you feel, and children will pick this up. They pick things up, don't they, all the time, and then we hope that they'll be able to then work on interoception. And it's not a quick fix. We're not going to do this, read the book, do the exercises one day and that's it. It's something that needs to be a lifetime thing. So you're going to start off and really work at this throughout, from when the child's small. I was really interested to read, to do with sensory, about, the Morrow reflex, the startle reflex in very young babies, which is really the fight-flight mechanism, is still uninhibited in adults. Some adults with autism still have it. So that then led me on to this idea that, the sensory, and of course, as Al-Ghani had said, it's always been that question, the chicken and the egg, what comes first? The sensory caused the brain to become more autistic-like in its approach, or was it the other way around? Which way is it? And now we're really getting into the field of how sensory is actually, the missing link to autism, and I got very excited about that, as I did with Stephen Porges. The polyvagal system is also, it's, some people believe in it, some people don't. The actual theory of it and how he uses it in terms of providing really calming environments and being aware of what your body is doing, and this idea that because of the overprotectiveness of the amygdala in the brain is causing this fight-flight mechanism, then how to deal with it is really pertinent. So this started these chunks of theory, when you're trying to find out about, and it's a lifelong journey for me. As soon as I found out Haitham had autism, I wanted to know, what is it? And you can't explain to someone, you can't say in a sentence, this is autism. It's impossible, because they're so multifaceted. Every child is different, but there's a sort of a census of things that are sort of the same. And so all these different theories then started to pop up into my head. Oh my goodness, that's like the polyvagal. Vagal is your inner system, the idea of these, nervous cells that you've got within the body that make you feel, butterflies in the tummy, or your knees not when you're feeling nervous. All of this began to sort of come together, and I'm really, really excited about what new research will come over the next few years in terms of interoception. And I did want to be the first person out there with a storybook.
I love it. No, but Kate, what you're talking, I always say 35 years ago when you started teaching and me 30, we didn't even recognize sensory as part of autism spectrum. It wasn't until I worked in an autism school with occupational therapists, and I would spend all my release time going and watching the occupational therapist, because I was like, wow, this seemed like what the missing understanding I needed for my students. And it's why I wrote actually my book, Practical Sensory Programs, because I was like, teachers don't learn about this, and unless we address the sensory, the children actually, we can't address the learning, because if you're feeling dysregulated, how do you learn? And when the other thing in the autism school, which I'd never seen, was we had on the schedule, food, drink, toilet, movement.
Absolutely.
But it was specific. It wasn't just send them out to the playground. There were specific movements different children needed to ensure that they regulated, and and recognizing that, not just expecting the children to be able to self-regulate. And I think because we base education so much on neurotypical children, we forget our neurodiverse children often might be seeking out that repetitive task, but that doesn't mean they might need something else to help them regulate.
Absolutely. You're so right. And it then makes sense of why they all present differently, because in terms of our senses, we as neurotypical people all react differently. I cannot bear garlic. I will run out of the room if something smells garlic, and others absolutely love it. So we see this divergence of, what sensory means for all of us, but we hadn't made the connection how disabling it was for someone that had either overly, oversensitive to everything. But yourself, if those shops, they're called Lush here in England.
Yes.
They sell all sorts of bombs, bath bombs, and when you go in it, wow, it hits you all of a sudden. The smell of it's just overwhelming. But within a couple of minutes, you've self-regulated and you're okay with it. Doesn't matter anymore. So that idea that you're not able to self-regulate, that you can't actually do that, that's always going to be a problem, will send you running out of that shop and never going back in again. So
but also for me, how exhausting it must be. So if you are constantly you can't push away that smell or that taste or that noise, so no wonder you want the same food every day, because imagine if you can't regulate that, then you would be hyper vigilant. So therefore, you want your chicken nuggets to be the same brand, the same look, because if you're hypersensitive to taste, and you taste that, and then also if we add on your concept of interoception. So imagine I taste something, I don't like the taste of it, but I don't know how to express that.
Yeah.
So some of my children get angry that it's the wrong barbecue shake, or they, so I think we have to really see how that, even though I'm talking about the traditional 5 senses there, then if you can't emotionally express that, you would just resist it and avoid it.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important that we recognize it and we do something about it. The onus is on us as teachers and educators to be able to make the environment good for all children. You're not telling me that a quiet environment isn't good for everybody in that class. Having classical music playing when you're coming in is, something that we've been proved, isn't it, that it actually helps all the children to settle. So there's lots of things that you can look at and that you can do. Smells. I mean, I used to, bring things like lavender and see whether the children then they could almost tell straight away. And there are certain smells that they like really well. Just as, if with autism, talking about the food, about something they just study, and there's just 5 things that they're going to like. So the children with autism are like 5 things, the yogurt and the chicken nuggets and the tomato ketchup and whatever, grapes, white bread. They stick to those because it's not a risk. Correct. Every time you try new food, it's a risk, isn't it? And some of us as adults, we don't like trying new food. I'm sorry, I'm not trying it. I'm never going to try an oyster.
No.
There's no way I'm going to swallow one of those, even though other people love them. So we're allowed to not take the risk, but, the children, we tend to force them, don't we? Eat your greens, have your sprouts, should we be doing that,
Yeah. Which is one of the things in my practical sensory where we do like smelling, but I teach the children to say yuck, because a lot of people don't teach the children what to say. So, or whatever your word is, but, it's actually not a no, it's a yuck. I don't like it. It's a whatever. Yeah. And what you were saying about the sharing, we need to share these things. I couldn't agree more that often with food, we need to show the children like, oh, I don't like the taste. I don't like the smell. Because sometimes food, it's a smell thing, or I don't like the texture. But actually helping them identify that and use words or communicate that, or using visuals is so important, because otherwise we see a child who's just really resistant, but that's not really what it is. It's they haven't got the communication. And that's what I like with Yuki, is that we're teaching the children actually how to talk about these different things. And the grandfather figure in the book actually is teaching Yuki, but also teaching the audience about the interoception. Yeah.
And the downloadable bit of the book as well, there are lots of social stories about each of the areas we've looked at. So about digestion, about, breathing, so there's lots of stories as well illustrated by Haitham, which would be a sort of social story you could read if you were talking about, eating food in the stomach and what's happening, that sort of thing. So that also will help them to understand, because lots of the things that, we get into something, a huge area. And as you quite rightly mentioned, there's lots of reasons why children don't want to to try foods or to have different foods. But we respect, we should be respectful of that rather than, as you say, blame them for being picky or he's a picky eater. That I don't like that word at all.
No,
picky.
No, I know.
You can't regulate because you're too young. I remember I had a friend from Kuwait, and she used to enthuse about this food that they had in Ramadan there, which they cooked every year. Fareed, it's called. And I couldn't wait to try it. And I went to Kuwait and they made it. It wasn't Ramadan, they made it just for me. And I put it in my mouth, and I honestly can't explain to you the texture. I just wanted to spit it out. And I thought, what am I going to do? I was just like, look, I didn't know what to do. And then I managed to swallow it. Don't ask me how. It's just the texture of it. Yeah. It was a bit like lumpy porridge. And although it smelled okay, and then I spent the rest of the time trying to hide it under salad. And I said to Ahmed, my husband after said, no, never again. I said, what are you talking about? I didn't realise, but I was in a panic. I couldn't listen to the conversations. I couldn't take part in what was going on because I was just thinking, how am I going to get out of eating this? And they'd cooked it especially for me.
Oh my goodness. I love that. Oh my goodness. Now I want to get back to something else you're saying about like too much information and sharing. Because when I talk to parents about and carers about doing toilet timing, not toilet training, one of the things I say for the first week, just take them to the toilet with you. And people get a bit freaked out. And I'm like, your child has no idea what you've been doing in that room. Like they've never followed you in. See, my kids, when they were toddlers, always were following me into the toilet and in there, right? But so many of our children haven't been in. So you need to take them in. You need to explain what's happening. They need to get used to the smells and the different routines. They actually, all they've known is a nappy their whole life. But but I think that's true not just for the toilet. I think it's true for, like you say, talk about, I'm thirsty. It's hot today. I'm thirsty. Yes. I like if people, when they read the Yuki book, maybe they can, as a class, like talk about who's thirsty, who's not, who's hungry, who's, and get children to talk more about, because we don't talk about it enough at school.
We don't, and especially, sort of going to the toilet. And in the downloadable, there's two charts. One is Yuki's poo chart, and the other is Yuki's urine chart. And it shows you the different colours, and so the children can have a look when they've had a wee. Is it the right colour? Is it really orange, or we need to drink something? Is it pale? That's super, just right. So that you can pin those in your bathroom, can't you, and put them in there. But in terms of, I remember my grandson toilet training him, and he really had no idea to realise that when I saw the look on his face, because what I did, I put a tin lid in the toilet, and we were having a potty party, so we were going in and sitting, and he suddenly had a wee, and he could hear the wee, and his eyes just up, and then he got it. Because he knew that, because before we did not realise because he was going into the nappy or he didn't know. But the combination of the noise of it happening at the same time was just, and I could then reinforce it. Oh my goodness, you've done a wee. And it didn't take long at all to do.
Yeah. I love that. And often it is just that little thing to make them realise and connect.
Absolutely.
That feeling.
Make the invisible visible, yes.
Yeah, make the invisible visible. Because as I say, so many of my parents, no, they don't know they need to go. You just need to take them regularly. Now, this is totally, I'm springing this question on you, and you mightn't know the answer, and that's fine. But I was thinking as you're talking, because many of the children I work with their poo have a problem where they hold and then end up with terrible constipation. Has that been found to be linked to interoception too, that holding like for a week?
I think that is linked also to anxiety. It's linked to an anxiety issue where you don't want to let go, so you hold on to it. And of course, we're not dealing with children here. This can be any child can have this issue, and they tend to be very sensitive children who are a bit highly anxious. So we have got this idea that it is linked to some sort of brain message. Not sure yet, because the science hasn't been done, whether it probably is an interoceptive thing, because either you don't like the feel of it, or you're not comfortable, you don't know what's happening, so you're holding on. before you realise that, if you hold on too much, it then becomes a real problem. And that can be really distressing, because then you've got little girls who are, they're fine, they've got no issues with anything else, but they start to smell a little bit because they haven't realised, it's going to get onto their pants, and then they don't get friends, and so it has a wide-reaching effect.
Yeah.
So just making it, talking about things, and there are some really great books now, aren't there? There's one about the animal with the poo on his head. Have you seen the one?
I haven't seen that.
But whose poo is it? He comes up out of the ground and he's got it on his head. And he goes around all the animals saying, "Is this yours? Is this your poo?" Until he finds the one that it is. And I think just talking about that and making it funny, means that it becomes, as you say, it can never be too much information.
No.
It's therapeutic.
Exactly. I love that, being therapeutic. Okay, so I'll have to find out the name of the poo book off you, and I will make sure. I was thinking I'll put the link to the YouTube with the monkeys on the podcast. And is Haytham's video available with like his cartoon, the one you're saying he did?
Oh, the cartoon animation, yes, it is. If you're looking at Haitham Al-Ghani and Levi's monkey Mike, that's what it's called. It is a monkey again, as you see.
I love it.
Was in England, there was a chap in the 1930s, 40s called George Formby, who was like a big film star, and he made these very silly songs with a ukulele. They might know, Chinese Laundry Blues and things like that, When I'm Cleaning Windows, and they can look that up. And there's a George Formby Society. And Haitham's first video was on one of their key songs, Chinese Laundry Blues, and he sent it to the society, and they thought it was wonderful. So he asked them, somebody from America said, "Oh, there's this thing called Levi's Monkey Mike. You might be interested to do an animation to it." And it was Monkey. Oh my goodness, yeah, absolutely. Worked on it hours and hours and hours, got a triple distinction, got the prize, because nobody else could have produced a 3-minute animation in the time that he did. Because it was so. And now it's played at the beginning and the end of every George Formby convention. So they play it.
I love that. Okay, I'll make sure I link to that. People will love to see that.
There's a sort of a documentary on the BBC also that rang him up and said, because they use a bit of it, because they were talking about George Formby and they used a bit of his cartoon animation. Yeah, if you blink, you miss it, but it is on there as well.
Oh, no, that's fantastic. I love that. I love that.
So I'll send you the link to that. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Kay. I'm so excited. So is this number 6 in the series? Is this the 6th one? I'm thinking we've got
I think
Red Beast, Winston,
and the Mauritius, yes.
Pancantosaurus.
Yeah, the jealousy one, haven't we? See, you're right, better than me, because you're the one who sells all my books, you see.
I just love them. And I know I'm not meant to have a favourite, but Yuki, I think, is my new favourite. It's like having a favourite child.
Hayden said that to me when I said I was doing this podcast. He said, "Well, I like Yuki the best. That's the one I like the best." But we have got the new Red Beast coming out in July with all new illustrations, because they were a bit dated, and Hayden completely redid them. So we're excited to see that.
Well, I won't get too excited about July, and I'll let my listeners know, because we were meant to have Yuki in January, and we didn't get it till June, and I'm so excited to finally.
Same, and the issues with although the COVID thing in terms of getting stuff around now seems to be better, but we will see, as you say.
We will see. Well, thank you, Kay. Absolute delight to talk to you, and thank you for sharing. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I hope you've got some great tips and strategies to make a difference. Remember, strategies wear out, and not every strategy works for everybody. If you're ready to dive in deeper to more strategies and ideas to make a difference, I'd highly recommend you consider Dr. Tony Atwood or my online courses. For more information, visit my website www.sulaki.com.au.